One of the great joys of my work here at Crossroads is meeting fascinating people and reading what they've written. And I remember an old bard one time saying, you grow by the people you meet and the books you read. Well, if that's the case, I've been growing a lot lately, especially after reading and now meeting Mark Thallander. His book is called Champions Plus. There it is. It's published by, Mark, was it published by? AP.
Aventine.
Aventine Press, Mark. Thanks for coming our way.
My pleasure.
I bet a lot of our viewers looking at you say, I know that guy. I think I know that guy. I've seen him somewhere before. And of course, quite likely where they've seen you was as the organist for the Crystal Cathedral for what, 18 years?
18 years, right.
18 years. It's quite a story and full of unexpected turns, and I'm sure more than your share of dark valleys of the soul. Let's start from the beginning. You were interested in music from your earliest age, right?
I was, because my mother and her accompanist at her church in Grand Forks, North Dakota, prayed that I would be a church musician.
Yeah, I read that. I read that. And, you know, a lot of parents pray for a lot of things for their kids, but it's not often it really happens. When did you sit down at the keyboard and start discovering you had some talent?
It was actually about 5th grade when my parents won an organ for a month with 4 free lessons, and I took those lessons and came home after the month was over, and the organ wasn't there anymore, and I was very sad. But the next day I came home from school and there was a piano. So somehow my parents knew that I needed a strong background in piano to move on to the organ.
Well, sure. Now, was it one of these old foot pump organs, or was it an electric organ?
It was electric.
It was electric.
Yes, yes.
Like North Dakota, you know, Central Plains, and also in Canada, a lot of pump organs out there.
Right, right.
I remember them in a lot of churches when I was a kid growing up. So the organ became your specialty at what age? When did you start focusing in on the organ?
Really, when I was in college.
Yeah. And did you play pipe organs as well in those early days?
Mostly electronic organs.
Right.
Yes.
The old Hammonds?
Yes, I learned on a Hammond.
Well, you know, for many years, the Hammond organ was part and parcel of Assemblies of God Church's subculture, as I recall, in the States and also in Canada. That characteristic kind of vibrato and a very full sound.
Right.
And I'll never forget the first time I heard a pipe organ. I thought, how can both of these instruments be called the same thing? I mean, the difference is profound.
Right.
What was your first experience like on a pipe organ?
Well, I was teaching at an Assemblies of God college, and there was a United Methodist church that had a position opened, and I was in a graduate program, and I thought it would be good for me to have a diversity of experience. So I auditioned for this position, and I got the job, and it was my first pipe organ.
Wow. Is it true that when you play the pipe organ, there's a bit of a delay from when you put the key down and you hear the sound, or is it pretty much instant?
In some of the older instruments, it would be much more like that. Many of the organs now are more instantaneous.
When did the connection with the cathedral happen? I mean, were you still, were you teaching at the time, or?
I was teaching at the time, and I was still in a graduate program, and I was facilitating a class in church music administration at Vanguard University in Costa Mesa, California, and I was actually taking the students around to various churches so ministers of music could speak with them. And one of the churches we went to was, at that time, called the Garden Grove Community Church, which became the Crystal Cathedral. And there was a little 2-line notice in the bulletin that there was a position open in the music ministry. And I thought that I would go and interview for that position because it would give me some good lecture material.
So you had an ulterior motive. Little did you know that it would be this long-term relationship.
Right. They called me and said, I got the job. I called the college and said, can I move my classes? And they said yes. So I was at both the college and the church for a number of years.
Now our viewers are looking at you and saying, this man only has one arm. And he's an organist. We need to hear the story. You weren't born this way.
No.
What happened?
I was playing at a church in Worcester, Massachusetts, and was driving back to Ogunquit, Maine, and there was a severe thunderstorm, and when I exited in Maine off the turnpike, the vehicle I was driving, I lost control of it and went into a ditch and rolled over into the oncoming traffic onto the turnpike.
And so did another car hit you?
No.
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 And what was it that caused the loss of the arm?
Apparently what's thought now is that the glass on the driver's side in the rollover did not protect the arm, and that the arm went outside in the rollover and was crushed and broken. It was actually pulled out of my socket.
Right, and as I recall in your book, the doctor said there was so much severe nerve damage and other kinds of damage that it was beyond repair.
Right.
Did you know that they were going to be amputating it?
Well, I signed papers just before I was rolled into surgery that if they needed to amputate, I gave my permission. But I also said to them, I'm an organist and a pianist, and I need that arm.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we have a couple pictures here of the accident, if we just take a look at it here. That's an SUV, right?
Correct.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that is a severe rollover.
Yes. When the paramedics came to retrieve me from the vehicle, I could hear them saying, we don't know how we're going to get him out of here. And then when the owner of the vehicle went to retrieve my belongings, the gentleman said, oh, I understand you've come to claim the belongings of the deceased. And he said, oh, no, he's alive, he's in the hospital. And he said it would take a miracle for anyone to have gotten out of that alive.
Did you retain consciousness through the whole ordeal?
Yes.
Really? You must have been bleeding profusely.
Well, my glasses were thrown off, and I couldn't see very much, except I could tell that the windshield was all red.
Yeah.
And so I knew there was a concern at that point.
Well, yeah, really.
Yeah.
So, you go through an operation, they remove your arm. What was it like waking up after the operation, realizing that you were an amputee?
When I first woke up, because I can feel my arm, even right now,
Right.
they told me that they were not able to save the arm, but because I could feel it and I had no experience with phantom pain,
Right.
I thought they told me that they were able to save it. And then when Pastor Duvall arrived, who I was staying with in Ogunquit, they said, we don't think he understands that we had to take his arm. So then when I woke up again, he told me, and I said, oh wow, and went back to sleep.
You know, I've heard of this phantom factor. What exactly can you feel?
I can feel, the best way I could describe it is if some part of your body goes to sleep, and you know, you kind of have to shake it out and it goes away. I have that type of feeling almost all the time. Sometimes there are extremely painful shooting pains, but I can, it's interesting, I can look at this arm and it's there, but I don't feel it.
Right.
This arm is not there, but I feel it.
Can you feel your hand?
Oh yes, yes.
Do you ever catch yourself by surprise and reach for something with the arm that's not there?
That's never happened.
No.
No, in fact, when I went back to playing the organ, I thought it's probably going to be extremely difficult because the left arm and the hand is going to want to come up and do what it used to do, but actually when I play the organ, the phantom pain is very calm.
So this is really something. You're playing the organ again, and you really are a master organist. This would require a whole retraining of your brain, wouldn't it? To sit there in front of this organ and just have one hand to work with? What did you have to do in terms of relearning the organ with one hand?
When I was in outpatient surgery, I came down the stairs at Pastor Duvall's home and I said, I think I'm going to go into some type of computer graphic design. I had been on a Caring Bridge website and people were so encouraging in writing comments and sending scripture verses, and he responded by saying, God has given you the gift of music and that's exactly what you'll do. So the next morning about 6 a.m. when he came in to give me my medication, I said to him, I've been awake since 4 and I think I've arranged 4,000 tongues for 1 hand and 2 feet. When I was in the hospital, my father died, and we had a memorial service a number of months later when I got back to California. And that was the first time when I played an organ duet at his memorial service. Not thinking I would really ever play the organ again, but composers wrote music for me for 1 hand and 2 feet, and I did some of my own arrangements. And so now I'm able to play again.
So someone listening to a recording of you playing the organ wouldn't know that you didn't have 2 hands.
Perhaps not.
Unless they were a real pro, right?
Right.
You know, Oscar Peterson, I'm told, the famous Canadian pianist, after he suffered a stroke, basically lost the use of one of his hands. And I went to one of his concerts at Roy Thompson Hall in Toronto a few years ago. And I'm not, you know, educated in music, but I sat there with my wife and listened to this guy, and he was just phenomenal. And basically, he was playing the piano with one hand. What was the biggest challenge for you in terms of, I mean, you obviously have a genius for arranging music and you understand what's necessary for one hand and 2 feet, but what was the biggest challenge for you in terms of performing?
I think the biggest challenge is that I don't have the stamina, either physically or in my hand and arm, elbow, to do long periods of practice. So I used to be able to rehearse for hours, and now I can maybe do about a half hour or so. And even in playing church services, I have to make sure that there are times of rest in between, and particularly if there are multiple services, you know, 2 or 3 Sunday morning services, I have to be very careful so I can get through that last service without injuring myself.
Now, why is that? Is it because it requires more focus, more muscular tension, or what's the reason?
I think one of the reasons is trying to get more notes in with just one hand, and the overuse of the hand.
Overuse.
So I've learned now how to be more careful with my use of the notes and with my hand position, so that I'll have this hand to play as long as possible.
You've received some awards, and we got a couple pictures here. Let's take a look. What are we looking at here?
That is at Lake Avenue Church in Pasadena, California. And when I had the accident, a number of people got together and wanted to have a benefit concert for me.
Right.
And at this particular benefit, there were 800 singers that came together, and about 4,000 people were there.
No.
And so this is the first time I played in a large public gathering. And this would have been after my solo when I was called to the pulpit.
Oh man, that must have been a very emotional moment.
It was. And there was so much love in that room. It was an amazing experience.
And what are we looking at here?
This is where I was privileged to receive the annual Life's Not Fair But God is Good award at the Crystal Cathedral.
Life's not fair, but God is good.
Right.
My goodness. What about just the personal challenge of losing an arm? Let's get beyond playing the organ here. Let's talk about Mark Thallander, you know, the guy. Did you go through any kind of dark nights, any depression, any sense of I'm useless now, any sense of this huge and profound sense of loss? What happened?
I was actually surrounded, and still am surrounded, by a network of caring people. And I never went through any type of depression. I would say I may have had moments of discouragement. It seems like almost every week now there's something that I need to learn to do again. A challenge comes up. But I've learned that if I can't figure it out and how to do it myself, that I will ask someone to help me with it. So that's been a bit of a humbling experience.
Well, yeah. It also would be quite a conversation opener when you're on an airplane.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people say, how did that happen?
Yes. I was in an airport recently where I have these tennis shoes that have the Velcro.
Right.
And a lady sitting across from me said, how do you like your tennis shoes? And I was sitting in a way that she couldn't see that I was missing an arm. And I said, oh, I love them. And she said, well, my husband discovered those a number of years ago.
And then, did she realize you didn't have an arm at one point?
I think her flight was called and she left, and
she never knew?
She never knew.
I'm assuming you're married?
No, I'm single.
You're single,
right.
So I was going to say what kind of family adjustments, but you don't have that complication.
No, I live alone, so it's even more complicated that way.
Now, do you have to kind of set the house up in a different way when you have just the one arm?
When I had the accident, there were some people that went out on a boat in Kennebunkport, Maine, and the driver of the boat had only one arm. And they said, what can we take to our friend? We're going to visit him tomorrow. And he said, oh, go to this certain store in Kennebunkport, and they have something from Sweden that you can take. So in my kitchen, I have this Swedish board, which I can, for instance, put ice cream in and move it up, and it will hold it. And I can put a piece of meat on these prongs that come up, and it'll hold it. So there are ways to open a can, and sometimes I actually have to sit on the floor and put the peanut butter jar in between my legs and get it open and stand back up. And
well, sure, you know, so many things we take for granted. When I was in high school, I broke my wrist, and I had a cast with my thumb sticking straight out for 3 months. And I couldn't believe all the stuff I couldn't do, but I made adjustments. I ended up being, I played hockey, I played football. No, my mother wasn't pleased, but you do make adjustments. Now, has this opened any doors for you with other people, children perhaps, who are physically challenged in one way or another?
There have been some people along the road, yes. It could be a high school football player, it could be a child that is born without a limb, it could be others who have been in accidents. But most of my ministry since the accident has been through the Mark Thallander Foundation, where we have been able to present musical concerts with bringing choirs together from Honolulu, Hawaii to Maine, to Springfield, Missouri, Los Angeles. It's been a wonderful experience. So I've had more of a public ministry since then. But people like Dave Dravecki, Johnny Erickson Tata wrote to me, and because of their influence and their ministries, when people have written then to me and emailed me about people that have lost a limb, even people in the war, that I've been able to send my book to and write a letter of encouragement.
Well, it's a great story, and we're going to hear your music in a moment. Here's the book again, friends. It's called Champions Plus. Mark Thallander and Friends. It's a very interesting read, and these friends bear witness not only to Mark before and after the accident, but also his character and the quality of his ministry. It's a very inspiring read.